is one that I think that we need to hear today, fresh from the heels of voting on the new slate of officers, teachers, deacons, and the various committees. I've been praying that the message today is very relative in regards to the new church year and how involved we all are going to be. There's a nifty little story tucked away in the Old Testament, and if you would turn in your copy of the Scriptures to 2 Kings chapter 7, I'm going to be reading verses 3 through 9 from the New International Version. Now there were 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate. They said to each other, "Why stay here until we die? If we say we'll go into the city, the famine is there, and we will die. And if we stay here, we will die. So let's go over to the camp of the Arameans and surrender. If they spare us, we'll live. If they kill us, we'll die." At dusk, they got up and went to the camp of the Arameans. And when they reached the edge of the camp, not a man was there. For the Lord had caused the Arameans to hear the sound of chariots and horses and a great army, so that they said to one another, "Look, the king of Israel has hired the Hittite and Egyptian armies to attack us." So they got up and fled in the dusk and abandoned their tents and their horses and their donkeys. They left the camp as it was and ran for their lives. The men who had leprosy reached the edge of the camp and entered one of the tents. They ate and drank, carried away silver, gold, and clothes, and went off and hid them. They returned and entered another tent and took some things from it and hid that also. Then they said to each other, "We're not doing right. This is a day of good news, and we're keeping it to ourselves. If we wait until daylight, punishment will overtake us. Let's go at once and report this to the royal palace." Actually, the backstory to what I just read really begins in chapter 6, verses 24 to 33. But I'm going to go ahead and give you my version of this story right now. Picture a man on top of a man. Picture a man on top of a mountain, and he's overlooking a Samaritan city below. The man is Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria and a Syrian army commander. His latest victory is the conquering of the Samaritan city below. Samaria is under siege, shut off from the rest of the world. Why? Because Ben-Hadad has ordered an embargo. No food is going into the city. Simply put, the Syrians are starving the Samaritans to death. Naturally, times are tough in Samaria. Food is hard to come by. Desperate times calls for desperate measures. A donkey's head sells for 2 pounds of silver. Imagine the vendors trying to sell their wares about the city. What might we hear? "Donkey's head! Get your donkey's head here! Get them while they're hot!" "No, I don't have any free samples." "Yes, the nose is tender." "Yes, the ears do taste like chicken." "No, I don't have any free samples, I said." You think that's bad? Too much for your taste or discerning palate? Or perhaps your pocketbook? If you didn't like that, there were other delicacies of the day. Treats that might be more in your price range if you didn't want to splurge on a donkey's head. Dove poop costs just 2 ounces of silver. Look around the room. Did you see anybody's ears perk up when I said the word poop? You know, if it makes you feel any better, this is the only sermon I have in my collection where I actually get to use that word. Poop. Try to imagine the people going around selling that kind of merchandise. You want them to come to you, but consider what you have that you got to sell. How would they do it? "Right here, dove poop. Yes, we got plenty of it." You want that with or without seeds, buddy? The poop is super duper. "You again? I told you I'm not giving out free samples." Still not to your liking? Donkey's head, dove's poop. Things got so tough back then in the city that they weren't above eating their own children. One day the king of Israel was passing by, and a woman stopped him yelling, "Help me, my master and king." And the king responded, "If the Lord won't help you, how can I?" And she answered, "My neighbor came to me and suggested that we cook my son and eat it, and the next night we would cook her son. So we did. We had dinner in my home." Now I can't help but wonder what the dinner conversation around the table would have been like that night. "Save me some of those ribs. The legs are my favorite part. These finger sandwiches are delicious. May I have the recipe?" Kind of makes a person think twice back then when someone looked at your kid and said, "Oh, your child is so cute, I could eat him up." No, really, I could eat him up. The woman continued. Next night I went to her house for supper and said, "Okay, let's eat your son." And she said, "What son?" And it turns out that she had hidden him away. The king, upon hearing this news, did what all the hip rulers did back then. He rent his garment and went into mourning. Yep, he took to wearing his fruit of the loom sackcloth and bugle boy ashes. The king saw all the people were desperate and at the point of death, so he did what any desperate group of people did. He blamed it on the preacher, who just happened to be Elisha, God's prophet, the very spokesperson of God. And what was Elisha's response to all of this? No need to worry. God will provide. And with that message of hope, it was decided, let's kill Elisha. The people were hopeless, helpless, and desperate. Now, not all the people in the story are helpless. Let's go back and take a look at the Syrians. They're outside the city, around the campfire, roasting hot dogs and marshmallows, making s'mores, singing camp songs, having a jolly old time. And because of this, we notice a troubling dichotomy is present. At the camp, there is feasting. At the city, there is famine. At the camp, there's plenty. At the city, there is poverty. At the camp, there's a merry spirit. At the city, there are broken hearts. At the camp, there is laughter and life. At the city, there is sorrow and death. But look now, in between both of these factions, there is still yet another group of people. We see 4 lepers are sitting. They're just watching, doing the only thing they can do. Sitting at the city gate, waiting for a handout, just trying to make a living. And as you envision the lepers sitting there, can we see ourselves? We have some in this church that could be classified as sinners. You know the old saying, some folks make things happen, some folks watch what happens, some folks wonder what happens. Sinners are the ones who watch what happens. I know of a church in Richmond with a dynamic youth ministry. The youth are alive for Christ, serving in many ways, and you think everyone would be happy with a church full of youth turned on to serving Christ, right? No! One Sunday, a seasoned sitter, we'll call him Maytag, because he's a built-in agitator. Wait for a joke, wait for a laugh. Yes, that was a laugh, folks. Gee whiz, I'm cutting jokes left and right here, and hardly anyone's doing anything. Let me say it again. I want the folks at home to hear your laughter. One day, a seasoned sitter, we'll call him Maytag, because he's a built-in agitator. Hey, some churches are practically laundromats. Well, this seasoned sitter said, "The youth come early. They take our parking spaces. They sit in our pews. Preacher, you have got to do something about it." On and on he talked, 150 words a minute, with gusts up to 180 words a minute. Not once did he rejoice. Not once did he celebrate the fact that the youth were alive and turned on into serving Christ. What were his concerns? His parking space, his seat, his self. I wonder if we have any sinners among us today whose only concern is self, where the thought of serving might be ridiculous to them, and they truly believe that they didn't come to this church to do anything other than just sit. Sitting is my calling. It's what I do. I may stand now and then, but primarily I'm a sitter. In my mind, I'm sitting even when I'm standing. I'll sit and not sing. I'll pass the plate and not give. I'll close my eyes when we pray, but if it's too long, I may go to sleep. Don't ask me to move forward so many pews. Don't ask me to smile, because this is how my face looks when it's relaxed. I'm here to sit. Know someone like that? Are you someone like that? You may think even now, how dare he call attention to it and put a negative spin on it? What's wrong with it? The church needs sinners too, and I'm only too happy to oblige. Oh, how wrong such thinking is. If sitting is all you do, like the lepers were doing, you're starving yourself, and you're highly likely contaminating the people sitting near you. Look down once more in the city. and hear what the lepers are saying. Why sit here until we die? At least the lepers realize that sitting and death go together. They're starving. They ate due to the generosity of the travelers and the city. But because of the embargo, now there are no more travelers, and there's no more food going into the city. So let's listen in once more on their conversation, what they're saying to each other. If we sit here, we'll die. If we go into the city, we'll die. Hey, I've got an idea. It may sound crazy, but hear me out. We could go to the Syrian camp. They may kill us. They probably will. But we're going to die anyway, right? Or they may feed us and we'll live. I think it's worth the risk. Would we be any worse off than we are right now? And so, fed up with sitting, which was the only thing one could get fed up on in the town, the 4 lepers leave the city and they begin their journey out into the desert. Meanwhile, during the night, God performed a miracle. God created a hallucination that had the Syrians believing that there were horses and warriors and chariots and like a mighty army. The Syrian soldiers said to one another, "The king of Israel has found a way to get the Hittite and the Egyptian armies to come and kill us." And the scriptures tell us that the entire Syrian army camp left the camp standing as it was and fled for their very lives. Imagine the surprise on the lepers' faces. When they arrived and they found the camp deserted and the Syrians were gone. The Bible says they ate and drank, took clothes, looted 1 tent of silver and gold, hid that, and then, like David Crumpler at a buffet restaurant, went back for seconds. Bit late on that. I wondered if it got through. At this point, the lepers were getters. They forgot the city was starving. Again, their only concern was for self. Are there any getters with us today? You know if you are one. We ignore the hungry and the oppressed, but we'll keep on getting. We're comfortable. We're well fed. The question is asked, what do you have for me to take today? I remember back when I was serving at Princeton Baptist Church during a fall revival, when on a Wednesday night prior to the revival service, we had a covered dish supper. A multitude of homecoming Sunday proportions came out to eat. And you notice this when you're the last one in line, as I happened to be last night. But where was this multitude during the revival service? I know they weren't back in the nursery watching the kids. If it wasn't for the visiting Methodists down the street, our numbers would have been much lower. It turns out some folks came to get food and get going. Who cares about being spiritually fed after you've been physically fed? That's one of the characteristics of the getter. How often are we like the rich man that Mason read about in the New Testament, who filled his barns and said, "Now I have plenty. Now it's my turn to eat, drink, and be merry." And with full barns and empty heart, he died that night. He was a getter. Do you find yourself coming to Chadbourn Baptist Church with the attitude of, "Entertain me. That music better be energetic and uplifting, and that preacher's sermon better be short and sweet and have a few jokes in it too"? Do you come to church to be taught but never thought about teaching? Or think that your time is past that you gave a long time ago, so that excuses you from ever having to give anymore? Folks, wake up and know this. There was no retirement in the Bible. There was no retirement age, not 65 or 60, and it shouldn't be today either. Do you feel that it's your God-given call to be a getter right now? Do you feel that you're too burned out to serve? The Bible is full of many folks who felt burned out, but continued to serve and continued to count on God to help get them through when they were suffering a burnout. Maybe you feel that you're best serving God in Chadbourn Baptist Church by being a God-appointed nitpicking critic. Heavens to Betsy, they're certainly easy to spot. It's funny in a sad way, but folks don't seem to mind serving God in their church in that capacity. If there was such a committee, let's call it a complaint committee, I dare say the service committee would have no problem in filling it. Some folks would probably ask to be life members on such a committee. Our service committee has met. All of us have already voted on the roster of those who will be serving in the new church year. The service committee has sifted through the sitters and the getters to find those who have a desire to serve God through this church. How often have we heard the stat that 10% of the church does 90% of the work or the giving? Our church has plenty of getters, if we think that statistic is true. Being a getter gives one the right to skip church conference, or Wednesday night prayer meeting, or Sunday night discipleship training. Why? Getters like to get all that they can, except for the following: getting bored, getting drawn into arguments, getting involved in the business or ministerial or spiritual matters of the church, or getting asked to help, serve, or teach. Your average getter has to draw the line someplace. Let somebody else get that, not me. Let's look once more. There is some good news to be found. It says in verse 9, all at once these lepers said, what we're doing is wrong. This is a day of good news, and we're keeping it to ourselves. We dare not even wait till morning. Let's go and tell the king. And that's what they did. And as a result, the city was saved. On that day, the city rejoiced. God blessed and served. And they had a revival. And what about Elisha, the man that they wanted to kill? Well, they gave him a spacious 4-room tent with hot and cold running camels. He probably got something better to eat than a slice of donkey's head with a side of dumpling. The main thing is, Elisha is right. God did serve. God did save. And catch this: God delivered the city before they even knew it. My friend Dennis Matthews, a Methodist pastor, has often been asked, when did you get saved? And his response is, about 2,000 years ago at Calvary. I just didn't know about it until I got into college. The work of salvation was done on the cross. Our work, our ministry, this church, like the lepers, needs to go and tell of God's salvation. It should be our desire to draw people to recognize God in the person of Jesus Christ. Do people see that in what we say? Do people see that in how we act? Is the going and telling of good news readily visible in our lives? How do you tell the good news? Benevolence? Homebound ministry? Mission giving? Nursing home visits? Teaching a class? Singing in the choir? Working in the nursery? Honest living? Generous giving? Outreach? The list, as you might imagine, can go on and on. Dr. R.J. Hastings, in his book Reflection on Ministry, tells of being in a hospital hallway and a man who came running up to him. The man grabbed me and said, "She's going to be okay." And he continued on. Now, I had never met the man. I'd never seen him before or since. I didn't even know the one that was going to be okay. But I shall never forget the spectacle of someone who was so overcome with good news that they stopped the first person they saw and told them about it. How do we tell the good news? Who is it that we stop? Are we making a difference for the Lord? Are we sitters? Because if this church sits, it will surely die. Are we getters? Because if this church gets, trouble is going to come its way. Or are we as the lepers were by the end of the story? Ours is a message of good news. Let's all of us as a church be eager to go and tell in our special way as the Lord has equipped us. Let's all of us strive to purge the attitudes of sitting and getting that hinder our church from growing or going forward to the point where God wants us to be. You know what type of person you are. Are you satisfied with it right now? How do you answer the question, is what I'm doing bringing honor and glory to the Lord? May God add His blessings to the reading. May He challenge us. And may we feel compelled to go and share the good news our way.